Good morning, Bimblers, and you join me here in sunny Warrington again. We can't go anywhere exotic today because they're having rail strikes, and there's only one train leaving each station for the whole of the day. So we might be able to get somewhere, but we probably won't be able to get back. So I had to quickly think of a little local bimble that we could do. So you join me here at St Oswald's Church on Winnick Road, the church that I'm obsessed with, and we're going to bimble down the Goulburn Road, and hopefully this time we'll get a bit further than Hermitage Green. Do you remember in my St Oswald bimble when it started snowing? So I think we should stop messing about and bimble. Let's bimble. This is Newtonley Willows, or to be exact, Newton Lake. Newtonley Willows hasn't always been called Newtonley Willows. It used to be called Newton in Makerfield, and before that it was just called Newton. Newton means new town, so you can imagine how many Newtons there are in the UK. You can't call every town Newtown without it being a little bit confusing. So they started adding the in Makerfield, just like Ashton in Makerfield. There were so many different Ashtons because Ashton means town full of ash trees, Ash Town. I'm not too sure what the Makerfield bit means, but I do know that it wasn't always spelt Makerfield or pronounced Makerfield. It was Megafielth, and then it became Maserfelth when the Venerable Bede wrote about it. He would have been writing about King Oswald, because he would have marched around here telling everyone about Christianity. And just like Newtonley Willows hasn't always been called Newtonley Willows, it hasn't always had a lake. This is man-made. If you watch my last video, my Mersey Cut 6 video, I mentioned a man called Thomas Peter Lee, and he was one of many people in the Lee family with the name Peter, albeit his middle name. And I told you how he had 7 children by 7 different women. Well, his firstborn son he named Thomas Lee, and Thomas Lee owned the land that this lake was on, and he also owned a large stake in the Wigan Branch Railway. And if you know anything about the railways in Victorian times, the best thing that could happen would be if that railway went to a tourist attraction. And Thomas Lee decided that he would build a lake and make it into a tourist attraction, so that all the Victorians would come with the parasols and the top hats and promenade around it. Thomas Lee had a look round his land and found the confluence of 3 brooks: the Millingford Brook, the Ellen Brook and the Newton Brook. And he blocked off the Newton Brook, raising up the water level and creating a lake. But unfortunately, all the industry here in Newton Willows all ran into those brooks. And by 1900, Newton Lake was thought of as a bit of a dump, and there was no wildlife living here, so there was no reason for anyone to come and have a look at it. Thomas Lee had big plans to build big Victorian villas for rich merchants and the well-to-do to live in, but it never came to be, and I don't think it's ever likely to come to be. It used to be about 16 acres in total, but now the M6 runs right through the middle of it. If you take a walk under the M6, you get to another ancient part of Newton Willows, Newton Castle, or at least a big mound of dirt where it used to be. It was built in the 11th century by a Robert Bannister, and he accompanied William the Conqueror, or William the Bastard, to the Battle of Hastings in 1066. And he built a castle here at the confluence between the Milling Brook, the Ellen Brook and the Newton Brook, because that was highly prized. And it was a place of strategic advantage where you could see everything that was going on. There's been many artefacts found round here, and it's believed that a lot of the artefacts are now buried underneath the M6 motorway. Legend has it that a knight from round here slayed a dragon, and he was given the town of Goulburn, just a little bit north from here, as his prize for killing the dragon. And the money that he made from owning Goulburn in rents and taxes, they believe that he buried it around Newton Castle. So bring your spades. That's Bimble. You join me here in Earlstown, and I'm stood in the train station knowing full well that there's no trains coming, but I actually thought that that would be the quietest place for me to do this little piece to camera. It's quite busy in the centre of Earlestown today, as it's a Saturday and they have a market there on a Saturday. I say market, it's more of a car boot sale without the car boots, but it's well worth a wander around if you like a bargain. So why is Earlestown called Earlestown? Well, it's actually named after a man called Sir Hardman Earl, and he was basically the man that invented Earlestown. Mr. Earl invested heavily in the railways, and he was actually the director of the Liverpool-Manchester Railway. That's the one that George Stephenson built. And it's thanks to Sir Hardman Earl that the railway runs through Earlestown. But you might ask two questions. Where did Sir Hardman Earl get his money to invest in the railways? And what was in it for him? Well, Sir Hardman Earl owned slaves. He had several plantations in Guyana in South America. And to give you an idea of how many slaves he owned, he was awarded a sum of money in the Slave Compensation Act of 1837. In 1833, they'd abolished the owning of slaves in the British colonies, and they were reimbursing the slave owners, which seems ridiculous. And Sir Hardman Earl was awarded £19,000, which is about £1.5 million today. And to get that straight, that was just for the slaves. He still owned all the plantations and the land that the plantations stood on. And no doubt the same slaves that were freed were re-employed back on the plantations and paid a pittance. No minimum wage in the Victorian era, especially not in Guyana. Sir Hardman Earl was a slave owner. His father Thomas Earl was a slave owner. His granddad William Earl was a slave owner. And his great-granddad John Earl was also a slave owner. And those plantations in Guyana used to grow sugar. Guyana was a big exporter of sugar. That's where you get Demerara sugar from. And that's why Sir Hardman Earl had such an interest in a railway going from Liverpool to Manchester. Because all of his sugar would have been brought into Liverpool, and when it reached Liverpool, it would have been put on boats and sent down the Mersey and Irwell navigation, or maybe the Bridgewater Canal. It was a very slow affair to get sugar into the centre of Manchester, along with all the cotton and everything else that they were taking. So a railway from Liverpool to Manchester would be a lot quicker, but a little bit quicker, because Stephenson's rocket didn't go all that fast really. I'm sure it's no coincidence that Sankey Sugar Works is along this railway, just a few miles back where we came from. And I'm sure Sir Hardman Earl probably envisaged all of his sugar coming down his railway. But most of it came down the canal, up until the 1950s. It was because they stopped bringing in the sugar down the Sankey Canal that they ended up filling in the Sankey Canal. From then on out they used to bring it on lorries. In fact, my granddad says that he lost his front teeth because he used to bring sugar to Sankey Sugar Works. He'd go to the Tate and Lyle sugar silo in Liverpool, which we've been to before, pick up a load of sugar, and the fellas that used to work in there would give him big lumps of unrefined sugar so that he could suck on them in the cab as he came back to the Sankey Sugar Works. And he says that's what rotted his front teeth, and I can believe it. But speaking of the Sankey Canal, I think we should take a Bimble down where it used to be to our next and last portage. That's Bimble.
It's up to the weather, you know that I surely would say she loves stuff. You can love the warm and that's okay. You can love the sun in every way. You can love the breeze and blow away. She loves the rain. She loves the rain. It's made in perfect measures.
This is Carr Mill Dam in St Helens, and it's had many uses over the years, and it started out as nothing but a bit of wetland. That's in fact where it gets the Carr bit of its name. Carr is Old Norse for marsh or fen. The mill bit of its name is why it's so big today. Some bright spark decided to run the Sankey Brook into it, and that expanded it out, and they used it as a mill pond for an old corn mill. It was expanded another time in 1756 when they were building the Sankey Canal, or the Sankey Brook navigation. They used Carr Mill Dam as the feeder for the canal. If you're going to build a canal, you're going to need a lot of water. Every time the lock gates are opened and the water flows down, you've lost that amount of water, and you can't get it back up again because of gravity, unless you had great big pumping engines, and that would be a very expensive affair. Most canals run by rivers, or at least between two rivers, and the canals that don't usually have a reservoir attached to them. That would be like the Rochdale Canal. That's got quite a few reservoirs along its length. The Sankey Canal kind of had a bit of both. It had the Sankey Brook running into the Carr Mill Dam, and then the Carr Mill Dam running into the Sankey Canal. It's all the expanding of Carr Mill Dam that makes it Merseyside's biggest inland body of water. If you think about Merseyside, it hasn't got many lakes or ponds. It's just basically got the Mersey, hasn't it? Of course, classically this would have been part of Lancashire, and that's probably why Lancashire Powerboat Racing Club is here at Carr Mill Dam. And apparently they're having a bit of a meet here today, because I can hear people on loud hailers, and there's people in camper vans camping out overnight with their powerboats. According to local folklore, people say there's a town underneath Carr Mill Dam, and people say that at low waters, when there's droughts, you can see the top of a spire of a church. But the divers that volunteer for the Powerboat Racing Club dispute that fact. They quite often dive underneath the water to retrieve bits of boat that fall off, and they say there's nothing underneath there apart from an old dry stone wall and a load of stolen cars. Seems about right.